guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to start a new series of videos. This is kind of an attempt to tame my TBR, because if you know me at all at this point, you probably know that my TBR is somewhat out of control. I have so many books on my TBR. It is slightly ridiculous, and every month I seem to accumulate more and more, and I don't seem to read as many as I bring in. So my TBR is always growing. It is very rarely shrinking, and that's not great, is it? So what I'm going to try to do here, starting today, is shop my own shelves, because I definitely succumb to the temptation of Waterstones or the charity shops near where I work and where I live, and that really shouldn't be my priority right now, bringing in more books. I should really be reading some of this stuff down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off a bunch of books from my shelves that I, at one point, very clearly was interested in, because obviously I bought them, I requested them, I asked for them, I brought them in. Once books go onto like this shelf here, they kind of disappear for me. I have like a smaller TBR, my more immediate TBR, which sits on my nightstand. This TBR, stuff just vanishes. It just vanishes. So what I've done today is I pulled off 5 adult fantasy novels that obviously at one point I was desperate to read, and looking at the stack here, I am still very desperate to read. However, they've kind of vanished onto these shelves. I'm pulling them out, I'm highlighting them again, and I'm getting myself excited for them. So looking at the stack of books, they are all books that I bought. None of them are books that I requested, and they are all books that I either bought within this last year or have wanted to read for a very, very long time. So let's just get to this. The first book that I have is one from an author who I really, really like, despite having not actually read any of her books. I really sort of admire her via social media and all the things that she has to say, particularly about diversity in fantasy. This is Jade City by Fonda Lee. So this book is about I think it's an East Asian inspired fantasy setting in which Jade gives particular powers. It enhances warrior strength, for example. And so obviously it's a huge commodity. 2 families within this particular city control the flow of jade in and out of the city. However, a new drug has been discovered that will allow anyone to use Jade's powers, and everything is descending into chaos. This sounds great. It's like winning all of the awards. It's being shortlisted for all of the awards, and I think the cover and title for the second book in the series has just been revealed. Super excited to read this. I think I bought this maybe in the first half of the year, and it's just sort of sat on the shelf, so I'd really like to get to this one soon. So next up I have a book that is actually a work of kind of classic fantasy. It's a much beloved book. I only picked up a copy of it recently. I used to have one when I was younger and I never actually got around to reading it. I've bought this copy. It is somewhat intimidating because it is about 950 pages long, but I'm very excited to read The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. So this was published in 1988, so it is exactly as old as I am, and it's one of those series. There's 4 books, or maybe the last one's split into 2, but it's one of those series that is so incredibly beloved in the fantasy community. I really want to read this, and I have for ages. I know it's a little bit slow, but that kind of slow burn fantasy is just so perfect for me. The Dragonbone Chair is a Farm Boy of Destiny book, which is one of my favorite fantasy tropes, and it's kind of fallen out of fashion, which makes me a little bit sad, although it's kind of understandable. But this is about a boy named Simon. He works in the kitchens of the palace, and he's a sorcerer's apprentice, and he has to go on this great quest to defeat evil. Sounds perfect. It sounds very Wheel of Time. It sounds very Lord of the Rings. 2 things that I love very much. I can't wait to read this. I have been putting it off a little bit because, oh my god, look at it. Next, I have a new book that was published earlier this year, and I didn't hear much about it within my kind of little area of the bookish internet. However, I began to hear lots of word of this book through adult fantasy bloggers, and I ended up picking it up. I actually started it, and I had to put it aside because of review copies that were due to be read, and I really regret that, so I'm hoping to pick this one up really soon. This is probably going to go on my immediate TBR. This is City of Lies by Sam Hawke. Not only is Sam Hawke a lovely person, because I have spoken to her via social media it before, but she is also a very talented debut fantasy author. Again, I have read a little bit. I didn't get very far before I had to put it aside. I think I read about 20 some odd pages, but I was absolutely loving the writing style and the world building. There's something about this book that feels so incredibly fresh and new. So I think it's going to be quite a complicated book, but this is about a character named Jovan, and he is the royal poisoner. He's the one who knows all of the poisons. He protects the royal family. There have been many, many years of peace. However, one day the Chancellor is poisoned by an unknown substance, and there are armies at the gate. This sounds so good. It sounds so, so fantastic. I've heard only good things about this book. I haven't heard a single negative thing, and it just looks so good. Apparently, I think it's going to break my heart, which I'm very excited for because I love it when books do that. So fingers crossed it doesn't make me cry too much. This next book I actually bought at Yelk, even though it is an adult fantasy novel, and it's kind of a funny one because I think it might be a little bit of a genre-bending one. It is, I believe, a dystopian novel, but it also has some kind of like strange fantasy elements. It's going to be kind of a weird genre bender. I'm really excited to read this. It is also making a lot of the sort of best books of the year list because it is the end of November. We are coming up to that time. This is The Book of M, and this is by Pang Shepherd. I think that this is a debut novel. It is a debut novel, and I have heard very little about this, actually, with the exception of it being on all of those best books lists. This book sounds a little bit strange, and I feel like I, having not read it yet, obviously, will not be able to sum it up as well as the back of this book does, so I'm just gonna read it. It says, 2 years ago, when the forgetting first reached the United States, Ori and Max saw its effects. They had watched a shadowless man speaking perfect English walk straight into a fire, not remembering what it was. Heard children with no silhouettes asking flowers where the nearest water flowed as if the flowers could understand. Why had it turned out that shadows were the parts of the bodies where memories were stored? Why did it happen to some and not others? Why did some people forget things after 2 weeks and some hang on for much longer? And when they did finally forget, why did the earth seem to forget too? This sounds so good. It sounds really interesting and weird, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. A lot of my Yalk hardbacks that I bought have been kind of languishing on the shelf here, but I'm really hoping to get to this soon. It sounds really, really fantastic. The last book on my list is one that I'm slightly ashamed to have on this list because it's by one of my favorite authors, and it is the third book in my favorite series by one of my favorite authors. This is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. I haven't read Oathbringer yet, which is slightly shocking. I read The Way of Kings back in 2011, I think, and I absolutely flipped for it. I loved it. It was my first Brandon Sanderson book that I ever read, and like, it made me into a complete Sanderson fanatic. I loved it so much. When the second book, Words of Radiance, came out, I read it in 2 days, which is slightly ridiculous. It's a very, very long book. And I've been waiting for Oathbringer to come out for a long time. And I got it. Obviously, I got the American edition to match up with my other ones. I was so excited. I started a reread of the first 2 books via audiobook, finished The Way of Kings, loved it just as much as I did before, and sort of stalled on Words of Radiance. I think I made it like 10 hours into the like 36-hour audiobook, and just never quite picked up again. I really need to finish that reread before I can get to this. I'm desperate to read this because it has some of my favorite characters in it. I know that some people don't necessarily agree with me on who those favorite characters are, but I just like, why have I not read this yet? Like, why have I not prioritized it? I couldn't tell you. So there you have it. Those are 5 fantasy books from my TBR that for some strange reason I haven't read yet. I really need to get to these, and doing this video has actually reignited my interest in all of these books. I need to find the time to get to them. Most of them are quite long. I think Oathbringer is like 900 pages long, maybe 700 pages long. They're massive books, but they're so worth it. I love long books. I've never feared a long book in my life, so I just need to get back to it. In the comments below, let me know if you've read any of these books, or if there are any books that you have sitting on your shelves that you desperately want to read but just never got around to. I would love to hear from you. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.